known you One9 for almost 20 years now, it feels like. It's been a long time.
Long time.
But I remember when you guys first came up with this idea, but this is not necessarily the film that you mentioned to me in 2004, is not what we just saw. So just kind of break that down for us.
Wow, okay.
As briefly as you can, that may be a lot.
Okay, well, just a quick little background about, where we came from before we even got into that. You know me from the art side of things. I grew up, in the DC area as a graffiti artist, street artist. And really, art was my background. So I had a background in painting, doing, murals, little experimental burners. And just, I picked up a video camera one day and I felt like, I can experiment with this, and learned a little bit of editing, and really just it was just really an experimental film producer, editor, nothing really done yet. Erik is a writer and a journalist, and he could tell you more about, how the film came into play, but he was initially called me up in 2004, and I let him tell that story.
I was a music editor. First, thank you all for coming and watching this. It's always fun to watch this with a different crowd. Every crowd has a certain energy, and this is really nice to watch it here, with you all, so we appreciate it. So again, to echo One9, thank you all for coming, and thank you for having us too, Wes. But to answer the question, to continue on, in 2004, I was a music editor of Vibe magazine, and working on, or editing, a 10-year anniversary story of Illmatic, because it was a 10-year anniversary at that time. And Illmatic was such a big record to One9, me and my friends, that there was no way that pages of a magazine could contain the story that it had. So we all got together and decided it would be a good idea to shoot some video and maybe do a DVD before the year was out. And this was 2004, and we thought we'd do the telling of the making of Illmatic in that same year for the 10-year anniversary. And 10 years later, here we are on stage and in this room with you all.
I'm gonna pick back up on that real quick. So we had our very first interview was with Oludara, which is the footage that you see in the film. And in 2004, we initially were either gonna make a Illmatic music story DVD, or after the Oludara interview, that kind of shifted our plans. He really gave us a deep history of the Jones family, talked about the spirit of the blues and jazz and what it meant to the family, passed down the books. He really talked about what the Jones family went through, what young Nas's life was like, but more importantly, just being a father, at that time. So we were shifting our attentions to really telling the father-son story. It was gonna be the father raising the Jones boys. So initially we went out of pocket, guerrilla style. We shot Pete Rock and AZ and all these guys, and we sent a trailer to Nas's manager. This is without Nas even knowing what we were doing. Right? It was just an idea. So we sent it to him, and he said, I'll meet you guys for dinner. And he brought Nas with him. We discussed some ideas. He wasn't fully committed. He was just listening to who we were, what we were doing. So initially, we weren't sure yet. So we just kept going. He said, keep going. So we kept shooting, and then we sat down with Nas again. We showed him a rough cut. And it was geared towards a father-son story. And he says, I like this a lot, but it was really my mother. That she needs to be told in this, and she really needs to be, she was the glue at the time. My father gave us more of the creative and gave us the insight into world music and creativity, but it was my mother that was working 2 jobs. So right then and there, before the Nas interview, like we were sitting, he was getting a haircut, we were discussing it, and we shifted our whole questions and everything towards making a totally different film.
On the fly, literally walked in there with one plan and then switched it, just like that.
Yeah, and it evolved over the last few years, but yes, it wasn't a father-son story, just that. We wanted to include, especially we wish we would have had more footage with the mother, but she had passed before we shot this, so it evolved into more of a community story.
Because his mother passes in 2002, you were saying, right, Erik? Right. So there's so much I want to get into. I'm trying to stay focused here, but to me, the star seems to be jungle, right? Which is not what I expected. I was ready to nerd out on Pete Rock and AZ and Primo and LES, but it seems to be a lot of this is coming through Jungle's voice. So just kind of maybe you guys speak upon how did that sort of manifest as the movie was moving?
I think, a lot of people say that, first of all, when they watch the movie, because people they expect a traditional music documentary where you hear tidbits about your favorite album or the making of your favorite album, and you hear about how the producers came about, which we did some of that, and the magic that happened in the booth. But I think what people are picking up on is not just Jungle, but really what Nas represented, or who he represented. And I think Jungle is that personified. And the story that we tell really with Illmatic, what we're trying to do with Time is Illmatic, is tell the story of what we saw Illmatic, which was an audio version of poetry of a people that he represented that didn't have a voice. And they were the people of Queensbridge. They were people of that generation who shared his worldview but were unable to articulate it that way. And Illmatic did it so nice and so it did it for us. Not only did it speak to us, but he spoke for us. So seeing Jungle in this film and seeing his voice be heard in a platform we rarely ever get to see it heard. Normally it's the geniuses and the poets like Nas. Rarely it's the geniuses and poets like Nas who tell Jungle's story. Right. But you get an opportunity to see Jungle tell that story for himself. And I think people pick up on it because it resonates. He's so raw and so honest and so real that, that story rarely gets told, just like Illmatic's story rarely gets told.
Right. Nas almost seems reluctant, right? There's his shots, I guess that's in his home when he's got the hoodie on. Because Nas always has this sort of very introverted, I don't really want to be bothered. And then Jungle's like this almost wonderful balance of Jungle's like, listen, give me a cigarette. Like, let me die. It happened here, it happened there. Like I feel like we all know a Jungle, like we all grew up with one of those. But how it was, did you see that relationship? Because One9, you were saying that you did not shoot them together much, or if at all, did you? No,
not really. It was it's extremely difficult to get in touch with Jungle. Prior to this, prior to this, it was, we did get his number from Nas, and we call, and it'd be like, 1 in the afternoon, we call him and say, we want to shoot this. What time is good? Oh, yeah. I'll get back to you. And it'd be like 3:30 in the morning, loud, and I can't hear. He's like, I'm here in the bridge, come through now. I'm like, man. I'm like, all right, man. And then another time he'd say, you guys got cameras? I was like, yeah. He's like, because I want to shoot my own movie. We're doing it on iPhones right now. I'm just not working out. I'm like, so that we get that too. But there was one moment that actually was a turn point in the film. Prior to actually making the film, I should say, it was a few years into it, maybe about 5, 6, no, it's about 7 years in, where we were kind of at the point where we didn't really have any money, and we were just shopping the film around as something that, we had some footage, but we didn't have any resources to get it finished, and we didn't have a Nas 100% commitment. This is something you got to remember, out of pocket. I was probably telling you over the course of years, yeah, we're still working on that. Right. But we were very fortunate to get the trailer to different people. So it went to Rashid Shabazz at the Soros Foundation, who runs Black Male Achievement. He sat down with us, loved what he saw. He said, let me get you to someone who could probably help you more immediately. And that was Orlando Bagwell, who's an incredible filmmaker. He directed Eyes on the Prize and just a real radical and pioneer in the sense of film. But he was at the Ford Foundation running Just Films, their social justice movement. And he called us up and he said, you guys have something here I feel like I can help you with. So he gave us a research grant. And from that, we were able to develop more until we got a production grant. And then we called Nas. And then we said, we're actually really ready to make this film. And so he came by our studio. He said he had 20 minutes. And we showed him just some old footage, some really old footage of him that kind of blew him away. He was just like fascinated. So that 20 minutes led to 45 minutes to an hour. And then we're looking at pictures. And there was a picture we looked at that was just devastating. It wasn't the one in the film, it was a different one. We talked about everybody in the picture. And they all had horrific stories. And it was a moment. We were just really sitting there, it was quiet. And so then we showed him more footage of his father. And he was like, just blown away. He was like, that's the music I listened to when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I used to record over it, over his old music and rap on it and stuff. But he was like, he didn't want to leave. So that 20 minutes led to 2 hours. And then he calls Jungle up. And he's like, you got to see what these guys have. And Jungle and Nas stay about 4 hours, and we all just start laughing, joking, and really talking about, you know, how important a film like this could be for our culture, because we're telling it from the inside out. It's not coming from, you know, we never made a movie before. It's our first movie. So we're kind of learning, but he was just said, you guys are making art, and I give you, you know, my trust, and at this point, let's finish the film. Whatever you need from me and from Jungle, I'm with it. So at that point, you know, Jungle did pick up the phone at like 1 in the afternoon, and it was very easy.
Back
the
to
next
Jungle.
day.
It's all about Jungle.
Back to Jungle. But no, it's good. I think your question was you never got Nas and Jungle together. So that day we did shoot them in Queensbridge, but it was a choice to really shoot them one at a time, because we wanted to get each perspective. And as you saw, Jungle really lays it out like very clearly, very raw, very honest. And we did get a text from Nas, who had to leave later, and said, please shoot Jungle one-on-one in a quiet room. He's got so much he wants to get off his chest. And that's what we did. That was like 3 in the morning at somewhere in Queensbridge.
And that's in Queensbridge, that when he's sort of talking about his mom and everything. So just to sort of pivot back to you guys individually as filmmakers and, Brooklyn filmmakers working hard. This is the first film that neither one of you had film experience.
Yeah, this is the first one.
So and this takes you 10 years, how did you not just quit right after? Because it was a time you were talking about when Nas disappeared, right? When he was going through his divorce with Khalees, you were telling me there was maybe 2 years where you didn't even hear from him. How did you just not give up? How did you find what was the motivation to keep soldiering through? You ran out of money, your primary contact is not speaking to you, but yet I don't feel that at all when I watch the film.
Part of that is not really caring. I mean, we grew up in hip hop, so you're gonna find a way one way or the other, and that's that spirit. You know, it's like it's part of not ever knowing how to do a film is one, and knowing that you can't stop. If this is gonna be your first one, let's finish this, because I don't want to do another one if we can't finish this. So it's like, you know,
Right.
This is it. So I think we knew that it was gonna be finished one way or the other. We just needed to be patient, and you know.
Right. Just one last thing for me before I throw it out to everybody else. One thing I watched, and this is maybe not necessarily in the movie, was how people view Illmatic now, right? 20 years, one of the greatest albums of all time, arguably changed the way people made hip-hop albums. But Nas didn't necessarily feel that way after Illmatic came out, because there was several albums, right? This sort of Escobar phase where he kind of moved away from this, and songs were Genuine and Puffy. But I wonder if he ever, not to take it, but I wonder if he ever, does he sort of look back when you guys were talking to him? Did that ever come up that people loved this album, maybe more than he loved it, sort of after it came out? Because he sort of, I feel like he did this, he walked away from it, then he's kind of come back. And I know after this movie, he's going to sort of, he's going to sort of be solid in it. But do you ever think about that, about how the perceptions have changed?
I know that, I interviewed Nas a couple of times. Once when I worked at the Source magazine, this was in 2000. And Nas was working on Stillmatic. And this is at the height of the battle with Jay-Z. And at that time, he was still haunted by Illmatic, and that was a big thing. People always asking about Illmatic, and everything was compared to his first album, to his debut. And that story, that narrative at the time was really important to hip hop and important to the story that everyone was telling about Nas. Has he fallen off over this many albums? Where was he with this? And how does this compare to where he came in? But the story that we told with Illmatic, it didn't factor in after Illmatic. We wanted to tell the story of his life and our lives up until Illmatic. We skip, as you guys can see, we go to Harvard, so we skip 20 years forward to where we are today. But we really stayed in the moment of that one album and what it meant to us, and how the person who created it was influenced. And we use them kind of as a case study, the way we looked at it. Nas and Jungle, we all know Jungles, as you say, the dude who's like, let me get a cigarette, yo. He delivers that line, and we all know this guy. And we know Nas's, and a lot of the Nas's that we know don't become Nas, And a lot of the jungles that we know don't get an opportunity to tell their story. But we know these people. And we wanted to use these guys and the father, Oludara, because he was really important to the whole picture. Because Oludara was not in the home per se, but he maintained an influence. And that's why originally we picked up on that influence that a lot of Nas's friends didn't have. And that's why originally what One9 was talking about was how, you know, we didn't want to lean too heavily on just Oludara's influence because the mother played such a significant role. But it was very important to also show Oludara's influence because that really did help those Jones boys become those Jones men, you know. So, I mean, I think the story that we told was bigger than, we tried to tell a story that was bigger than the music or, you know, what the record meant to critics such as myself, but more what the poetry, what the meaning of his music and his words meant to a generation of us. And that's what we stayed with in our questioning, and, you know, we always use that as a model.
Right, right. Well, I think you guys did a fantastic job. I cannot really remember a movie produced by my peers about my culture that gives me a great appreciation for something I loved already. But then you're touching on so many things. You know, Oludara talks about the educational system. There's the prison industrial complex. We were talking about Q-Tip's breakdown of it. There's so many things that really, I hope, gives people who are not familiar with Illmatic such depth. And I just really want to applaud y'all. This is literally one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen. So I just want to give it up to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy y'all stuck through it.
Thank you, man.
But if you guys have some questions, if you can just kind of come up to, you can come up to this microphone, and or I guess we're on both sides with Meredith on this side, and we have. Anybody have any questions for her? Well, I see Deshaun is making his way up there. We have one over here. Okay, let's get on.
Can you guys comment? Personally, I think, you know, Nas is. I don't even know the official thing that happened there at Harvard, but personally for me, it's like the most important benchmark in the history of hip hop. Because now we're going to force university systems to give credit to hip hop like it fucking should be. Because Nas is the best of all time. No. He's better than Pac. He's better than Biggie. They've been gone 15, 20 years.
All right.
So, truthfully, they can't, you know, we gotta say he's numero uno. Sorry. But my point being, my friend over here took me to Walt Whitman, where he used to write in the Brooklyn Inn, okay? And that's the benchmark that's been set here.
Right.
Now,
Is that
we're
a
talking
feeling-
to them
oh,
in the
sorry.
same dialogue as, okay, he's every bit as relevant as a Walt Whitman. He's every bit as relevant as E.E. Cummings and whoever, any poet of American history. And this needs to be, you know, in the, not just in the hip hop community, but in universities nationwide. Now we can talk about this. The only other thing we can think of is, you know what I'm saying, Tupac at USC.
But to comment real directly on that, it's so important to contextualize our culture in so many different regards. But I do want to shout out our associate producer, Martha Diaz, who is here
That's right.
today.
Where's Martha? Yeah, give it up for Martha.
To more directly to your point, is Martha is spearheading an education curriculum for the film as we speak. So it will be in the school systems. It's going to be in high schools, and it's going to be a college curriculum taught. And Martha is working on it as we speak.
Because the stuff you shot when Nas goes to Harvard, that's at the very, very end, I would imagine, of the whole project. What was his sort of feeling? Did he sort of, in his typical Nas way, downplays it, you know, at the end? But you guys maybe have a more intimate. Was he hype about it, or was he as cool as he ever was?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna just give you a little more even structure as to why we even put it in the film. You know, we had so much footage, 10 years, and really trying to figure out how to tell this story was one way that we were struggling with initially on really what's the best way and what do we want to really say with it. So what we did structurally, narratively wise, is break the album cover down. So we looked at housing with New York State of Mind. We looked at how did Queensbridge get started. We looked at how did that affect the Jones family in particular, and how did it affect Nasir as a young kid growing up. We looked at Life's a Bitch as a theme and looked at the family being torn apart. We looked at One Love, and we looked at the prison industrial complex through Q-Tip's eyes. But everything in context of how it fit within the album. We looked at Memory Lane, and we looked at the people around Nas that surrounded him, right? I mean, at least thematically, that's how we're putting it together. And World Is Yours, of course, looked at the world at a greater whole of what's going on with him now. And at that moment in time, that was Harvard at the moment, which meant so much to Nas and his whole family. They were all there. His daughter Destiny and his aunts, and it was a very important moment for him to really feel like validated in the sense that he's, like I said, I'm an 8th grade dropout, a New York City product that a school system failed, but it wasn't just my music that they're honoring. It's the way you carry yourself as a human being. I think that's really important to contextualize, himself that way. So, I think he was really extremely proud to be there.
It's also important to note that, because we wrestled, we know we wanted to put Harvard in the film, but we wrestled with the context, because I don't think that Harvard is the end, or because we put it at the end of the film, but it's not something that we all aspire to in the beginning. There's a certain amount of validation that we wanted, and that kind of represents that. But we also didn't want to make it feel like his journey ended at Harvard or was aspiring to Harvard from the beginning. It was really just to try to show that hip-hop has come in such a way, and he has come in so far in his journey, that there are institutions that, like Harvard, that are willing to finally recognize him. But at the same time, there's a juxtaposition that there's a subtext there, because they're talking about Nas, but Illmatic is important for the people it represented. So while they're celebrating the poetry of Nas, and we all can easily get seduced by Nas's poetry. We all did. When it first came out, that's all I understood, was how great he was as a poet, how great Illmatic was. But if we don't really take time to understand the people for whom he was speaking, then we'll have lost the moment. And that's what we hope to do with the film. And that's why, the Harvard thing was really important for us to put in there, but there's also there was some really careful balance that we had to play, so it didn't make it seem like, oh wow, now he's at Harvard. Wow, he's arrived, because he only arrived as much as Jungle or the people of Queensbridge had.
Right, I think that's good. I felt the same way. But I thought it was great that just the last thing about the Harvard thing is Skip Gates, who will be here in January. So after Nas says his thing almost humbly, like, it's for good for me, and I must say for hip hop, right? And Skip Gates was like, yeah, shout that out. That's the truth. So it was really like Harvard recognized. I do agree that Harvard is Harvard, but it's us celebrating it. That is way more important. Right. This is more important than a fellowship at Harvard, if you ask me. But Deshaun.
First, just want to say thank you to both of you brothers for putting in the work and creating this great piece of work from the culture and for the culture. Really appreciate that. My question is about the song selection that you guys put together for the movie. I noticed that Memory Lane, One Time for Your Mind, and I think Halftime aren't really featured in the film. And I just wanted to know if that was a conscious decision or it was just something that was left on the cutting room floor, and just your thoughts about that.
Well, Memory Lane was in the film, not lyrically, but when he goes back to Queensbridge, that was the beat that we used underneath. One Time for Your Mind, I think we did use that. We used that, and Halftime is,
Talking about how we featured it.
Yeah. So again, that goes back to thematically how we wanted to structure it. So New York State of Mind really was like, those tracks were looking at housing. Like there's really 4 or 5 themes that we wanted to touch on, was housing, the school system, the family, prisons, and community. And we used those songs, New York State of Mind, One Love, Memory Lane, World Is Yours, and Life's a Bitch, I think, to really look at those issues. And the rest we use as subtext, as music within. And also, here's the other part. It's really expensive to use this music, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's the reason you probably don't see a lot of music documentaries out there is, one, I don't know if people really have a lot of patience to put those years into it, but it doesn't take that long. But it does take a lot of resources We were very fortunate to have community involved, to have grants involved, that otherwise this film doesn't get made. You know, we can't afford to pay. You're paying publishing, you're paying masters, you're paying every sample clearance. And, you know, for us, we've never done this, so this is all new territory. So we're figuring out how do we raise money. So that's part of why it took so long as well. So you have to be kind of judiciously, like, how you're using the music in the film.
Also, the music that we did choose, you know, the music that we wanted to make sure that we didn't intentionally want to make sure that it didn't feel like a music documentary, but the story that we told began to overwhelm the music. So as we wanted to tell a little bit more of this part, some music part might have to be sacrificed. So we said, okay, when the DVD extras, which the DVD should be coming out soon, we'll try to include more of the music for the fans who want to hear more about the making of the music. But we felt like the story that we were telling was really important. And the story of the music has been told a lot, and it's been told over in, you know, in many different ways.
But you had pretty much every song on the album is in there, right? Sony licensed the entire album to you, right?
Yeah, and the bonus DVD, as Eric mentioned, will have, it's Nas in his own words breaking down every song title, and it's every producer in their own words breaking down their processes. So it's a really informative, you know, it's uncut, and
Right.
it's great for the Illmatic fan. You know, they'll
Yeah.
love that.
No doubt, no doubt. Definitely. Yes,
Hello.
ma'am.
Hello. I just wanted to know, you know, Nas is kind of similar to some artists today. He affects, you know, a huge generation, especially his borough. You know, you have Jay-Z with Brooklyn and Dr. Dre with Compton. So what, you know, what sparked the both of you two to decide that, okay, it's time to do a Nas documentary? Like, what was so unique and special about Nas that you chose him to do a documentary about?
You know, thank you for asking that question. The thing is that we didn't decide to do a documentary about Nas. There's an important distinction to be made there. We wanted to do a documentary or tell the story of Illmatic, which is a little bit different than the story of Nas. And that goes back to the earlier question you asked, Wes, about, you know, his other albums and how they related to Illmatic. We wanted to tell the story of Illmatic because we felt there was an opportunity to tell a story of us in Illmatic, which is what we thought he did. It's just the world wasn't listening at the time. So how else can we get people to understand how important that was to us, but to kind of tell that story through film, you know?
There was one thing I just went to look at my notes. It was the craziest thing that Back to Jungle. Who's
Where your notes at?
This is my in the mini Moleskin over here. You ain't got you don't get to see that. But when Jungle's walking, he goes, it was less police back then, so it was crazy, which I thought was my father-in-law would go crazy about that commentary about more police, stop and frisk. There was so many things you sort of touched on. Was he sort of aware? I mean, he's so honest. He's not trying to make these profound. He's just talking to you straight up like any dude around the block. Or was he aware of kind of this commentary, this sort of macro commentary he was making? You know, I'm asking about Jungle here.
That's a good question, because that does open up a whole box of questions. Like he's saying there's less police, so it's crazy.
Like almost like he's happy that Queensbridge is better now that
Because
there's more police.
I don't know how aware he was about the commentary he was making, but you gotta also filter it through the eyes of somebody who was 13 years old. He's reflecting on a time when he was 13 and 12 years old. When Jungle's telling us that story about being shot by Ill Will, he was 13 years old when he got shot, when Ill Will got shot. He was 13 years old, and there was so much about that, you know, story, and it was so deep, you know, that he opens up a lot in there. But it's coming from the eyes of somebody who was young. When he tells his mother, you know, I used to tell my mom this shit. Why didn't we move?
Yeah,
you know?
that was great.
First he said, I used to tell my mom this shit. Like, who talks to mom like that? I used to tell my mom this shit all the time. Like, yo, why didn't we move? But it really opens up a lot of questions. We don't explore it too deeply, but it hangs there.
Yeah.
Because his mother probably had wanted, who didn't want to move? She,
Right.
you know what I mean? She wanted to move. Why didn't she move?
Right, right.
When you dwell upon that question, it starts to open up a lot more into, you know, the condition than just this one little 13-year-old kid. Same with this question of, or his commentary on, there were less police out there, so shit was crazy. Maybe it wasn't less police. Maybe the police policed differently, or maybe or maybe the way he saw it, they didn't police him the same way they policed others.
Right.
You know, he was a
Him
little
getting
kid.
shot was not a priority for them
Or
as.
he was a little kid, and maybe he saw it differently.
Because then there is obviously there was extensive policing because everybody in the liner notes is locked up. So at some point, cops came, you know. But I did say, we were talking about it in the back, I think sort of looking at the long tail of Nas, I think Nas came back to me after his mom died, because his mom died 2 years after mine did, and when he started talking that, I felt that connection. And then when Jungle, this big tough Jungle, let me get a cigarette, it's like, don't tell mommy. When he said mommy, I was like, that's so real. Like, yo, I'm a thug, but please, mommy, don't. I'm gonna be in real trouble once my mom knows I got shot. Not the actual shooter is irrelevant, but the beating from my mom's is what I'm scared of. But I love that. But, yes, sir.
Hey, good evening. Brian, I'm a native Brooklynite, recent graduate of Morehouse College. So I just wanted to know how important was capturing the candidness and humanity of the project area to the overall impact of the film?
It was super important for us to really, spend as much time as possible there. So I don't know if you saw, there was a lot of Super 8 footage. So I shot the Super 8 footage a lot because I really wanted to get more of an organic feel of day-to-day life, not necessarily people knowing there's a camera there. Just, we were very fortunate to have people like Wiz, which is Nas's childhood friend, walk us through and take us everywhere. We had the Queensboro president who also walked us through. There's people who didn't make the film, like Jappy Jap, who's in the MC Shan song, and Bob Lee, some of the original pioneers that really took Marley Marl under their wing that walked us through. So, we had there's so much love in Queensbridge that people don't really get to feel. You hear the stories, you may hear it in songs, but it's a community like anywhere else. And it's people's lives are day to day, and they live day to day, and there's a strength and there's a spirit there that's very strong. And to really capture that was important for us.
I loved how Nas, we talked about this a little while ago, how Nas described his home in Queensbridge, how his home was the sanctuary. But when you listen to Illmatic, it sounds almost like, it's very dark, and it's almost like, Armageddon. You don't know what's going on in Queensbridge. If you've never seen Queensbridge, you would have no idea that there's a small village inside the largest housing projects in America. Like, there are people, there's a lot of, like One9 said, a lot of love there. A lot of people who, obviously there's a lot of everything going on there. But at the heart of it, there's a lot of humanity taking place. There are heroes that we never hear about, and that's what we really wanted to spotlight. Those people that you never get a chance to hear about, who happen to influence people like Nas. The one person who comes to Queensbridge, you get the chance to hear his story.
And just one last point, Martha Diaz, who's been setting up our community events, set it up. So right before we did the Museum of Modern Art, we screened it in Queensbridge at the Jacob Riis Center with the whole community there, and it was crazy. That was a great screening, and people were shouting out their names as little kids. It was fun.
I mean, I think we have I know we have a few. I know Deshaun helped put together. There's an exhibit upstairs about voices of people growing up in New York City housing projects. I thought it was interesting, and not to get too nerdy, although I must, is that I remember when Illmatic came out, when Nas said, I love committing sins and my friends sell crack. I always thought it was interesting that he was rarely positioned himself as the criminal, that I was the criminal, I was the guy next to the criminal, and then I felt like validated with these points I've been making for years, where he says in the movies, like, I did these things, but I never really wanted to do it. And I think if you went to all to projects around, they have this perception that there's this hive of criminals being born, but really you have Ann Jones and Oludara and Jungle and Nas are probably the dominant population in the projects, ruined. So I thought that was just even another crazy commentary that there's just so many gems that they slip in there quietly. But if you don't know Illmatic, you don't catch the things. But I know you guys, that's why I think, again, why this is so brilliant for a hip hop documentary.
I mean, one thing we learned as we were talking with Nas and really just starting to off camera too, just really get to know each other, is he's a real artist, not just a a rap artist, but he draws, he paints, draws screenplays, he does comic books. He's visual, so he can tell a story. So he was talking about he used to draw a lot, but back in the days, he really wanted a computer. So he asked his mother to get him a Commodore 64.
Commodore 64, no doubt.
Yeah, the Commodore 64, it's in the top of the dresser. But he says, I didn't really like the programming, the C++ or whatever, but I just like to have it for the girls to come in and see I'm ambitious. So he was always a studious, thinking ahead.
That's what's up. I love it. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your work. I'm very inspired, especially since you had the courage, the vision, the passion to pursue something that you hadn't done. That's extra amazing. I wanted to ask, since I know it's 20 years later and all these albums and time has passed and artists grow and we all grow, in the times that you had to talk with him or in your own opinions, I really love his work because he's also very political. And I think I don't think he's sold out like maybe other rappers and other artists. And I wanted to ask if if you could speak at all about how he was politicized, and if there's any mention about that, and also if his airplay is affected by that, like songs like about 9/11, songs about that have a lot of history in them, and voice protest and reality. If he what you think about that, if that affects his airplay, and how he gets inspired and how he got to write like that. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. I think as far as where Nas is today and his career, where he's gone, if he's been penalized, I think you're asking how he's been penalized or how his being such sometimes with political messages, how it has affected his career. I think more recently you can see Nas has been an honest artist and he's grown. Like if you look at his most recent album, Daughters, the album Life is Good, he has songs like Daughters where he's actually an adult rapper. I don't know if I can speak too much to. That's a different conversation about where his career has gone. We could have that conversation, outside out in the hallway over there. But I just say I can talk about with Illmatic and how he was politicized. One of the things in the film we tried to explore. What we hint at is the motives of a person. What makes them who they are. What are the influences of their lives, and those books that he read were so important to him. And it was important for us to show that. Nas, I remember listening to Nas and listening to Illmatic and all of this, and his vocabulary was crazy. And I used to be like, what's he doing? How is he getting a vocab like that? And Wiz, who didn't tell us here, talked about how, he tells us, but it didn't make the film, talks about how Nas used to cheat, basically what I would call cheating, by looking up medical books, medical journals and looking up words so he can rhyme with bigger words. But then you have these books where he actually read, and his father was really instrumental in helping him understand some of these, books, like the ones that he talked about in the film. And, in the 80s, it was really popular, the 5%, and, it was really popular to seek what we called knowledge. But Nas was doing that outside of that popularity. He was going beyond just the lessons or what have you. He was reading source books and things like that. So, I think part of that is what shaped his worldview. He wasn't just somebody who only looked out of the window. He had, he talked about how his father went on tour and brought him back different instruments, brought him back different knowledge. So he was able to see the world outside of Queensbridge, even though he will go away in the summers to the South. So he saw a different lifestyle than most kids in the hood who just stayed in the hood. But we could talk about the other stuff at another time.
Then we have some over here.
What's up, fellas? I just got two quick things. First thing, from everybody else, I'd like to echo the thank you for this production. Second thing is, who do you feel had the better verse in Life's a Bitch, and why?
That's a good question.
Hey, I can start with that because I used to go back and forth on this like crazy in my head. Because, obviously, it's easy. AZ made the Source Hip Hop quotable. He stands out on the record because he's a lone voice and not against Nas. But it's just like when I listen to Jay-Z and Eminem on Renegade. Originally, you go directly to Eminem. It's really loud, it's really in your face, he's really got crazy lyrics and he's going hard. But then after you listen to those lyrics a lot, then you give Jay a try and Renegade, you start to realize the genius of what he was doing. The same with Nas on Life's a Bitch. First, you listen to AZ, and it's undeniably, it grabs you immediately right off the top. It grabs you immediately. That's almost a perfect verse. Take away the word Schweppervescent. You know? Like, what the fuck is that?
See, I thought it was effervescent at first.
I did too.
And I was like, that's a cool ass
Until
word.
we did this film. We didn't realize until we did the film. He said Schweppervescent, which comes from a commercial back in the day. Like, I was like, why did he put that word in there? Like, so now you can listen to Nas's verse with different ears after you hear Schweppervescent.
What do you think? What do you think?
Man, I'm not from New York. I'm from Ohio, so I was listening to Bone Thugs when Illmatic came out. But I'm keeping a buck.
This is
Thank
supposed to be
you.
a booing. Some people are booing over here about that.
Hey, I respect your opinion, but
That's honest, man. That's honest. Nothing wrong with that.
nah, that Illmatic, that was the first track I heard from it. And like I've been an AZ fan like ever since I heard that track, and I just feel like he never got his just due. When I saw him in the documentary, I like clapped in my head because I think that he's an ill lyricist.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Thank you, brother. We got over here, guys.
Hey, that was excellent work, by the way. One question though, and that you didn't bring up the one song was one of his biggest hits. It ain't hard to tell. Was that based on a sample clearance that you couldn't clear up? Was that you couldn't clear up the song to put in the documentary?
No, ain't hard to tell. It's in the doc.
It's in there.
It was focused
the
though.
acapella. The acapella was
The
in there.
acapella was. Oh, okay, because I didn't hear the music. Maybe because it's based on because it was the Michael Jackson sample. So maybe that was a clearance.
That was tough. That was actually.
It was
that
tough. Okay.
It was quite pricey though.
Right. MJ.
Sometimes when it comes to clearing samples, it's not even always about price. Some samples, someone might not just let you clear. They just won't let you have it. Like if they own it, some people were like, I'm not clearing this for nothing, you know? No matter how much money you throw at them. So music samples are really difficult.
Or one night, right? We were talking about how you got to track down 6 dudes. You got to track down every piece.
It's you know from music, it's the masters, the publishing, but then there's everybody who has to play the sample in that. It's not easy, but that was an editorial choice. But in the bonus section, we have Large Professor and Nas breaking down that whole section, and it's something special.
Yeah, I wanted more Large Professor.
Yeah.
The extra P doesn't get his. But I will say this, from anybody in the music business or the film business, I challenge you to go and find another music documentary that has so many songs. What they were able to accomplish by including the actual compositions. I mean, Notorious, which was produced by, right, Puff and them does not have that many big songs in it. Right. I think we'll get into, again, that's another seminar about sample clearance, but even more why y'all dope. Yes, sir.
How you all doing? First of all, I want to say I appreciate the two of you or the three of you for your work. Look at you all as the new Hutland brothers or the new Spike Lee and Ernest Dickinson, if you will. I hope that
Reginald Hutland,
our creative ears and eyes will grow old together. Meaning to say that you all will do work for years and years to come, because we all appreciate you. So never stop what you're doing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Give it up for that. Don't ever stop.
And thank you, Wes, too, for what you're doing with this, man. This is and the Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival. It's a lot of work you're doing, man.
No. I'm with
Thank you.
It's all about these. Don't ever stop. Don't ever nobody stop in here.
I'm getting to my questions. I'm a little bit
long-winded.
No, that's all right.
You got to try round
warming up.
I'm getting to my question. I'm a little bit long-winded, but I've always been like that. So hip hop for me has been like my little brother, like 2 years younger than me, or maybe about the same age as me. As I'm 46, so I'm the OG in the room. But I watched it from disco. I watched it from only Uptown. I watched it from Go Downtown. And for me to see that you all were doing something with it, saying documenting what's going on and telling our story, because I feel like you're telling our story. Everyone in this room, if you're from age, I don't know, from 5 to at least 55, it's our story. And who better to tell it than you all from looking from right there, from the earth, but the point is this. When you spoke with Nas, and I'm not getting at anyone who may work at Clear Channel or someplace like that, DJ Enough, I respect you, love you to death. Love you to death.
One of the good guys.
Because, yeah. What you don't know
Enough is
about
one
me,
of the good guys, no doubt.
in my long spill, I'm a DJ, a turntablist, a crate digger, a sample king. I'm trying to get into doing score and movies or what have you. I'm going to do that for free in turn with somebody even at my age because I can't get enough of the music. I dig almost every day, this and the third. But Angie Marr was on Power 105 maybe a month ago or so, talking with Nas when this was coming out, and she played Illmatic. She played one of the songs from, and the phone lines lit up, and she said, and I was in my car talking to myself. I said, "Oh my God, oh shit, that feels good. Oh my God, oh." And the radio doesn't get that anymore because I know it's supposed to be a younger person's game. But did you speak with Nas about this? And I think this is my question. I'm leading to this. I know, right? I know, right?
Take your time,
give me a little bit of
brother.
leverage. Give me a little bit of leverage, like pastors say in church. Give me a little bit of time. Let me preach. What it is this. Even though the landscape is younger, I think black music culture or hip hop culture is the only culture that says, you're 35, you can't do this anymore. You're 21, you can't do this anymore. Nobody said that about jazz, nobody said that about blues, nobody said that about gospel, nobody said that about punk or anything else like that. Did you speak with Nas about that? Because the radio needs Nas and other people like a Nas, whether it be Joel Ortiz or people like that, they don't get heard.
Right.
But I do get to hear bubblegum music. I'm trying to be critical, but
So
I'm
I
trying
guess
to hear.
the question is, did Nas kind of speak on his own legacy?
Because I feel on the humble, they're biting their tongue saying, "Oh, I like hip hop today," but look at New York, it's imitating what's elsewhere. We would have hold up a boulder. I'm not mad, but I'm saying even the music is so diluted right now. When you hear Nas, if you hear Nas right now on the radio, you go home, or Biggie, you feel good. After that, it's back to the same 28 songs in a row. Same 28 songs in a row. And the one station on the left says, "Oh, they're playing that. Let's play that too. Push the button, play that song."
So did these conversations come up at all?
I know I laid a lot on you. One last thing while you're doing that. At the end of this, please put down. This is 46 years of music just going at you. I know you got stuff later on the cutting room floor. Please leave a Facebook page or something for us to let us know. Do a Kickstarter. Do something where I got $10. I'm throwing it at you. I got whatever. I'm throwing it at you because you're working on a project.
That's love. Thank you.
Do something. Make some T-shirts, whatever. Email me. Holler at your boy, or whatever it is.
All right, let's get up to it.
I'll just say real quickly. It's a lot there, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just feel like every generation has music that represents for who they are, right? So like, we study music, but I think like, in the 70s they had Marvin Gaye. They had so much soul music, and a lot of that generation may have not liked rap when it first came in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't their thing that they really were connecting with, but you can't really discredit, what they like or don't like. Just like the young 15, 16-year-old kid is listening to what's out right now, and they feel it the way they feel it. It's not to say it's better or worse, it's just an emotion they're going through because they're coming of age. Like we were coming of age during the Illmatic, and that album represented so much for us. But the same way that what's going on meant so much for somebody who was 17 in the 1970s. That's an emotional music that connected to them, and I don't discredit that. I just feel like music is a learning tool, but it shouldn't be an end-all, be-all for the way we survive. Second part is, I think, we're hoping this film really inspires the next generation of filmmakers. I feel like we're caught in a society where the camera is faced towards us as a selfie society. Please turn that camera around and shoot that culture around you. There's so much going on around us that really needs to be documented, and I hope that this inspires the next generation of filmmakers.
Can I just throw one out there? I remember the statistic in maybe wasn't the sales of Illmatic went up by 80% after your movie came up of the album, right? Wasn't there a direct correlation to your point? This movie came out, now people are buying Illmatic again. I know I bought the 20th anniversary.
That's a normal thing that happens too. It's a rediscovery, which is, it's a good thing for us and for our generation and for young people who want to discover it. Because I think what happens is, when you go back and you try to listen, if you've never heard Run DMC and you put Run DMC record on without the context, you might just think it's garbage. They might be Peter Piper picked peppers. They weren't complex. They were simple. But when Run DMC came out, you felt it so strongly. They were the greatest rap group at the moment, of all time perhaps. But now giving it context is hard if you don't have somebody to show you what it meant and to guide you through the understanding of what they meant to a culture. And that's what we really hope to do with the movie. And I think you can listen to Illmatic after the film if you've never heard it before and have some understanding of not just Illmatic, but who we were at the time.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And one last, someone made the point that, if we study Walt Whitman, we study Shakespeare, we need to study Nas and Illmatic. This is just the next generation of brilliant poetic lyrics that really reflect the greater whole. So it's putting that in the school systems that what Martha's doing and what so many other hip hop, education leaders are doing now too. It's important that we contextualize this. It's not just music that, our generation listens to. It needs to be put in the younger generation's mold so they can connect. Because if you're learning about this in like the 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe all the way through high school, it'll resonate different. But if you just tell like your son or daughter, play this is what I was listening to, they don't have that patience level. And they don't like to be told what to do anyway. So, you know what I mean? But in school, it's a different context. I think that's how it can live to the next generation. And we do want to hear it on the radio too, whoever's out there.
We're talking to you,
But, yeah.
Exactly. You ain't never stop.
No, I appreciate everything.
Nah, you definitely the good guys. Hold on one second. We got one in the back.
Yeah, first off,
We're running out of time a little bit.
thank you, first off, for this work. This is beautiful. I mean, you pull back the curtain on a whole community. I mean, you're saying it just now. I'm going to show this to my godson. I'm going to get this DVD. This is a documentary in the true sense. So thank you and congrats on doing it. My question is, was there a particular moment in making this where it was really challenging, where you maybe had doubts or it was just really tough to move forward? And it may have been a different moment for either of you or it was the same, but was there one, and how did you adjust and overcome that?
I can start with that. I think, in any time you're making films, and One9 touched on this earlier, there's always a challenge of resources. That's one. When we first started, it was really just fun. Just a bunch of friends who had an idea, who shared a love for an album and wanted to tell a story. And it was just fun. We pulled out money out of our pockets, whatever we had, collected whatever equipment, if he had a camera or somebody else had recording equipment, bring it tonight, we're going to interview Oludara. Come on, Pete Rock said we could come to his house. And we would get in the car and we would go, or the train, or whatever it was, or the bike, or whatever, or skateboard, whatever we had to get there, we would take. And we would go and document. And, but over time, when you want to tell a story at the highest level, which is what we wanted to do to represent what we thought was a piece of art that represented the highest level, it needed resources. And trying to find money, resources mostly means money. Trying to find money to help make things happen is really a difficult thing. One9 talked about Orlando Bagwell, a brother from who was at the Ford Foundation, Just Films, who kind of tapped us on the shoulder, 2 first-time filmmakers, and said, I believe in your story. I believe in what you're trying to tell us. And before he did that, we couldn't get 2 dimes. We couldn't get attention from anyone in any organization or any foundation to really look at our story and see that it had merit. So, I mean, finding those resources. And then there's always the issue of time and really managing your time.
There's also programs too out there after before we got picked up by Tribeca All Access, which is very important, that they help first-time filmmakers adjust to doing this whole process. And we're hoping now, and you're going to have Skip Gates here too, and he talked about this as well, as having people in positions who understand the culture that can greenlight projects like this. Because you don't have to just be the prolific rap artist. A lot of times we need people in those positions who can really give us an opportunity to screen the film. I mean, they gave us small grants, but they also helped us with everything that we needed outside the film as well. It's platforms, media. I mean, they really understood culture and community, and that to us was so important to have, you know, someone to bridge those gaps. Because other than that, we're sitting at home working, you know, out of pocket. And it gets frustrating because I know so many filmmakers out there working that 9 to 5 and trying to make a movie in the middle of the night, and it's a rough ass trip.
Yeah. All right, I know we're running out of time, so maybe take these last
I'll
two.
keep it quick.
Yeah,
My name is Boxonics. I'm a hip hop producer and enthusiast. I remember when hip hop was, you could only listen to it on an underground tape. You could only listen to it in the street. You know, I was young. And to see you guys bring the Harvard thing, because hip hop is in universities now, college curriculum, it's an amazing thing. And I just got a question. What's next? What you gonna do next?
That's a good question.
Well, let me just say, you already
I got $10 on it, whatever it is.
Let me just say that the Martha Diaz, who was here when I talked about it.
Where is Martha? Where is Martha? I haven't.
She might have stepped out.
Please
Oh,
stand
she's way
up,
in the
Martha.
back.
Please stand up, Martha, in the back. We keep
No,
talking about you.
Martha created the Hip Hop Education Center that's at Columbia University, and also brought hip hop to the Schomburg. And we could talk about what's going to happen with the film, but go ahead.
So right now it's important for us there are two things that are really important for us. One is to get this film into school systems so it can be taught to students who might be able to take something away from it and they can relate to it. And that's what we're working on now. You go to timeisilmatic.com to find updates about that. The second thing is, and this is important for us as well, is 2 days ago it was announced the 134 documentaries that qualify for Oscars this year.
Yes, sir.
And our little film does qualify
Yes,
for
sir.
an Oscar this year. However, it's really important to note that Oscar nominees, which will be announced in December, the final 15, then they narrow it down to the final 5. Those nominees don't come from out of a hat. There's usually a lot of money put behind the campaigns for an Oscar. This is what the public normally doesn't know. Why you see some movies, you're like, how the hell did that win an Oscar? How the hell did it get nominated? You know, it's because somebody took a lot of money and took out ads and trades, schmoozed Oscar Academy voters. It is a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes campaigning that goes on in getting an Academy nomination. Now, again, we have a small distribution company, and we are the little engine that could in this race. But one of the things that's important for us is for the Academy to at least recognize that we are here, that our story is important to be heard and understood. So we'll be trying our best to get that awareness out. So please, you can go to timeisilmatic.com. You can follow us, Illmatic Movie, on Twitter and Instagram. And hopefully you can help spread the word to any Academy voters you know, people that you love that you might think, might be able to help us spread this word, that we are here, that we are here for their consideration.
So, Eric, will there be something for us film ignorant that we can actually do to help that cause if we go time? I don't know what, lobby or send emails.
We have a meeting
Protest.
on that next week, and we're figuring. We're ready to go. But we're coming up with that strategy as we speak. Like it's gonna be something that comes from community, comes from the hip hop community, comes from the Nas's of the world, the Khaleesi's, the Pharrells, and the I meant to say Alicia Keys.
You can't say that word.
I meant to
by
say
law,
Alicia
right.
Keys. And people that really have supported this in the past. But it's really important that people who really connect to these issues, it may be Chicago is Illmatic. It may be Ferguson is Illmatic. It may be something that is really, it's not just Illmatic is synonymous for struggle, but it's also synonymous for hope. So there's ways that we can look at things, and it's not just about an academy. I don't even care about the award. It's more about being recognized that these films need to be told, and it's more important for us to get out there and get more of these films out there, because otherwise we're fed reality shows, and look, it's just it's just a trap. That's really just it's ridiculous to see that.
So, brother, let's get our last question in. Yes, sir.
Again, like everybody else said, you guys did an incredible job. Real quick question. I am not from New York, and one thing that I saw was Nas talk about how the bridge is over and South Bronx, how that affected him as an artist, and kind of like the divide of New York a little bit. South Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. How did Illmatic kind of affect you guys being from Brooklyn? Were you guys kind of like, this Queens rapper, and then you guys kind of fell in love with him, or was it more like just open, receptive? Like I said, I'm not from the area, so when I hear KRS or if I hear Nas or if I hear Pac, to me it's all hip hop. Where I feel like, out here it's a little more clicky.
I'm born and bred in Jersey, so I'm also from outside. When it comes to Queens, but it was just across the bridge, not that bridge, but but it affected me in a way. I didn't choose sides. I chose sides based on artists as opposed to like my allegiance to a different borough. But it was based on artists because I loved MC Shan. But then when KRS-One came with that record, it really did, I kind of like was on the side with popcorn, like watching, But I followed it the whole way, and I felt it was a brilliant time in hip hop. I felt it was a brilliant time, and outside of the battle though, Illmatic and those records, particularly Illmatic, what One9 said resonates because it was one of those records that it didn't matter where you were from. I wasn't from Queensbridge. Most people aren't from Queensbridge who appreciate Illmatic, but those themes still spoke to me.
The same. At that time, I was born in D.C. I was listening to Go-Go and Rakim, Big Daddy Kane. It was a different era, but for me, it was just beats and rhymes. I mean, you had at that time one of the best ever out, Pete Rock and Premier and Large Professor. I mean, for me, we had, we were all wearing camouflage and spray paint and growing up as young kids. And Illmatic it just was shocking, man. When I listened to that, I mean, I don't think you made it through the first 3 songs without replaying that over and over and over again. So for me, I didn't care about anything more than if it sounded right, we were listening to it. I love BDP. I was playing Criminal Minded over and over. Somebody should do that doc too, trust me. That would be an interesting story. Scott LaRock, and there's so many classic albums that need to be told, and really, go deep with it. It's not really, those times were different, but it's a different time now, and I feel like we really need to go a lot deeper into when we're telling our stories. So I think someone should tell that history, even more so.
Well, I'm from the Bronx, so I did not like. I remember when the Bridge is Over shut down the Juice Crew, which is even more, again, if we get real nerdy in the after hours about how significant Illmatic was to bring that entire borough, which had been destroyed by KRS, roaring back, and it never had been. Listen, like I said, I'm from the South Bronx, but that's even why he was more significant. He just brought an entire thing back. But DJ, enough last word? Yes, sir. Enough, there you go.
What's up, everybody? Nas and Jungle grew up, of course, in the 80s. It was was a crack era, right? Times Square had pornography back then. Anyway, to make a long story short, the city's cleaned up. It's Disneyland. It's not the same city that we're talking about 15, 20, 25 years ago. Is there another Nas? Is there ever going to be another Nas? And if he's out there, do you know who he is?
Do you want to sign him?
And maybe part two to this question is, in 2014, who would you shoot next that's currently out
That's a
right
good
now?
question. That's a good question. That's right. You can't say Kendrick.
I would say, every generation, I hope, would have their own Nas. I don't think there could be another Nas for our generation because Nas is our Nas. But I think every generation has its own Nas. It's really difficult for people outside of that generation to understand them, to know who it is, because those are experiences that resonate with those people. Like, now it's hard, it's hard to listen to a young person who's a teenager maybe out there who might be making a record right now and truly understand his struggle the same way I did when I was his peer, But I'm sure it's being done, it's being done. Somebody just mentioned Kendrick Lamar, which I think he's a great artist. I love J. Cole, I think he's a great artist. I think these people, there are still artists who make really good music and make emotional music and try to tell their own honest truths, with poetry. Whether there'll be another Nas, it remains to be seen. Even for us, it took 20 years to really get to the point where we can truly look back at Illmatic and say what it really represented for us as a generation. Because when I first heard it, I was just hit by the beats and the poetry, and I didn't even know. I was just like, I don't understand. It makes me feel a way. I don't know what this feeling is, but it's deep. Pass me the Hennessy. You know what I mean? I didn't know what it was. But now it took all this time to unpack all these feelings, and I'm sure that's going to happen with somebody who's making music today. As far as telling a story about them, I think it really relies on those storytellers. One9 talked about turning those selfie cameras around and showing the world of the people that you know and the community that you see. And it's going to rely on those people. This was our story, not just our story, but our story. And somebody else has to tell their story. And that story is probably going to be told another 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, you look back, I compare Nas to Marvin Gaye in that sense. So it took, 20 years, but I don't think the next Nas is here. I'm a huge basketball fan, so Illmatic to me is like Jordan. It's just like the pinnacle. But who's that next LeBron? I don't know. I don't think they're born yet, to be honest with you.
Well, listen, this is, we do have to sort of wrap it up, but one thing I just want to throw out there is the difference between now and then is that you have these other guys telling the stories. This is the guy on the radio. It's us. We're in positions of power to tell the stories, to find that next Nas, where Nas had to struggle and had to convince people. Now the people who are going to make that happen, we're in this room, and this is, I just want to thank all of you guys for coming out. Obviously, Erik and One9 and Martha and that team, but all you guys in here, just to remember, man, we are in a position to push this forward in ways that we've never been, all right? We're earning money, we have the knowledge, we have the resources, which is a whole nother conversation, but this is why we do Told It Firsthand, and we're all in the room together. So if you have some time, I don't know how many times you wanted to learn about how do you get a Ford Foundation grant. These brothers did it. If you want to learn how New York radio works, that brother's right there and has been grinding it out for decades, all right? We're all in this room right now. We may not be, it's like a wedding. We may not be here, we may not be in a room together for a long time. So as long as we can, just, let's stay connected with this. But this is just fantastic. So please join me thanking One9 and Erik Parker.
Thank you.
Martha Diaz.
Thank you all.